Most of us, if not all of us in this room tonight, can agree that a major shift needs to happen. Not just a sustainability shift, but a shift to regeneration. And that's what's so exciting about this evening is the amazing presenters you have here and our moderator Blake are here to share their stories. They're real Colorado leaders and real Colorado businesses that are charting the path to this new regenerative future. And while we cannot change history, what we can do is influence the future. And I'm really excited to hear about what these leaders are doing here this evening. And next, I will get off the mic, I promise. I'm going to introduce to you Rachel Davis. Rachel Davis is going to introduce to you the Conscious Capitalism Colorado chapter. And she is a leadership and high-performance business consultant. She's a founder and publisher of the Leadership Elevator magazine and one of the 5 co-founders of the Colorado chapter for Conscious Capitalism. Rachel?
Okay, well, I know that if you're here, you're the choir. And you're either here because you are well steeped in sustainable agriculture or you are steeped in conscious business, whether you think of it in the framework of conscious capitalism. So I want to speak the framework of conscious capitalism so we're all in that same framework tonight. And we like the merging of these two because when you merge some different dimensions, the conversations shift and have more openings. And my request to you is, even though you're probably highly knowledgeable, you're the choir, you're the front runners, that you listen to create a gap in your own knowledge. So you'll hear things you know, you may hear things you disagree, I'm okay with both of those, but that you listen for a gap, because it's only in the gap can we increase our consciousness and make a shift faster. So you may have heard of this book, Conscious Capitalism, and this started this framework that I'm going to be talking about. We have a national organization and we have chapters locally and internationally, Conscious Capitalism chapters. Before the end of the night, if you are interested in adding to our leadership team, we want to expand our leadership team, and if you want to shape and help build our Conscious Capitalism chapter, then please, so Sandy's here, raise your hand, Sandy. Brenna, you just saw, or me, give me your business card, one of the 3 of us, so that we can follow up with you. We want larger leadership. The diversity makes a difference. Okay, so conscious capitalism is a new attempt, sort of new, at framing business in a new light, and really inside of the belief that business it has the potential of being a real force for good and making all the changes that we want to make through business. It also matches the current state and the current consciousness of humanity. We are a little more conscious and aware than we were 100 years ago. So the 4 pillars are higher purpose, stakeholder orientation, conscious leadership, and conscious culture. So let me just review them briefly. So a stakeholder orientation is not like what has become a traditional business of shareholder. So shareholders aren't one stakeholder, but the stakeholder orientation would mean if you're going to shape your business, you're paying attention to the customers as stakeholders, to your employees, team members as stakeholders, to the environment, to your community, to your vendors and suppliers. And it takes a different level of kind of thinking to how to create value and serve the needs of all those. Higher purpose is one of the pillars. Higher purpose allows us to have a purpose that we can all get up underneath, that all the stakeholders can serve that purpose together. It eliminates a lot of trade-offs and it allows us to see the interdependencies and synergies that we wouldn't see if we were in kind of a normal framework. Then, of course, conscious leadership. If you aren't expanding and growing and being uncomfortable with what you don't know, then probably you're limited there. But it takes conscious leadership and a conscious culture to be able to create all the value that we see as the potential for business. So conscious culture is authentic, integrative, natural, trusting, all those things that we love about great cultures. That allows for the people in the business to create personal growth and professional growth as well. So ultimately the challenge is to create wealth and value, not just in the financial domain, but in the spiritual domain, the intellectual domain, the social domain, the emotional domain, the ecological domain, and all the ways we can create wealth in one business. That's all I'm going to say about the 4 pillars. You're glad I'm done, right? So now it's my pleasure to introduce our panel moderator, Blake Angelo. And some of you don't need an introduction. How many of you already know Blake? But yay, most of you don't. Yay! Okay, so he is Denver's first manager of food systems development. And that's located in the Office of Economic Development, so right here in the city. He is responsible for supporting food-related businesses and community development efforts in 3 primary areas. One is a balanced approach to healthy food access. A second is mid-skills job creation in the food area. And the third is expansion of local food businesses in those targeted neighborhoods. He is a Denver native. He has a track record, that's why I thought more of you might know him, but you will know him. He has a track record of supporting hundreds of food and farm-related businesses. He understands that strong food systems need strong food businesses and multidisciplinary partners. Now, prior to the position that he's been in less than a year, 6 months, Blake worked as a business and organizational development consultant, was the director for Beanstalk Foundation, served as the first specialist for urban agriculture for Colorado State University Extension here in Denver and Jefferson. And he has a master's degree in public health and a bachelor's degree in evolutionary and ecological biology. So, he's the right man to moderate this panel. So please show your appreciation for Blake being our moderator.
Thank you. Yep. The only thing I have to say is that all of our panelists have even more experience and even more relevant thoughts than I do today. That's why I get to moderate rather than be on this panel. What I wanted to start with is yet one more framework for us all, because I think it's really important for us to develop some common language as we think about what's new and what's different about sustainable agriculture. I always like to do a little history lesson. Does anyone know how old the state of Colorado is? Yep, go ahead.
1876.
Perfect. So we just celebrated our 139th birthday as a state, meaning in the last 140 plus-ish years, only about 20 years before that, were there a lot of sort of Western developments. In fact, agriculture, the oldest farm, is only 170 years old in this bioregion. All of this is relatively new. That's a few long lives. So we are co-creating a process, and you'll hear a lot about what it looks like to do it in a new framework. But before we get started, I wanted to talk a little bit about this notion of farm to table, because I think we often contemplate that there's this big food system that sometimes we forget. So in terms of our food system, we think about our producers, our farmers, our ranchers. Sometimes we might even think about our distributors, the trucks. That's how the food gets there. And of course, we're the eaters. That's my favorite system. It's so simple. Unfortunately, as many of you know who've worked in agriculture and sustainability more broadly, there's many other components. Food is often processed, it's often redistributed, it's often moved to multiple retailers and wholesalers and brokers, and at the end, maybe we see it at the grocery store, maybe we see it at restaurants if we're lucky, but actually, unfortunately, many people don't see it at those venues. They find it at food pantries, or they don't find it at all. So when we think about our broader food system, we have to think about all of the different ways that agriculture moves through our communities, as well as the key domains in which it impacts our cities and our societies. So I often say, let's not think about food. Let's think about a great city or a great society, and then ask, of that, what part should food play? How should we think about designing and interacting with food such that we create the great society of tomorrow? And we know, I think many of us that work in sustainability, that there are some key fundamental threats to that. What I want to also say, though, is I think there's some excitement, there's some energy, there's some real momentum behind the work that we're doing right now. In fact, Governor Hickenlooper at a recent conference said that Colorado could be the Silicon Valley of agriculture nationwide. He challenged us with that. There was an economic development study that took for the first time, that food system level view of what is agriculture, and agriculture moved from being one of our 10th largest industries to one of our 3rd biggest industries in the state of Colorado. This is a big deal. I would also tell you, just recently found out that Colorado is number 8 of all the states in terms of organic sales from our farms. So we're actually doing tremendously well in some domains. We also know that some of the people in our communities are suffering, that we have very high rates of obesity. A recent LiveWell report said 50% of Colorado adults are obese or overweight. We know at least a third of children in the county of Denver are obese or overweight, and 20%, or 1 in 5, regularly experience hunger or food insecurity. We have big problems here that we have to deal with. On our farm side, we also know that we're seeing a loss of farmland. We're seeing additional farm consolidation. And we're seeing an average age of our farmers increasing, creating additional burdens on society and a real transition challenge for those existing farms. So as we move forward, we're thinking about the food system in a very complex and comprehensive way. And as many of you who are familiar with sustainability, it's always like this. But it helps us to make sure, and particularly as we look at evolving businesses, and I think you'll see each of our panelists reflect this perfectly well tonight, that they really understand and they've designed some of their solutions with some of these core pillars in mind. They're dealing with the economic issues. They're deeply contemplating the environmental issues. They're always thinking a little bit somewhere about the public health, the health of everyone, and at the end of the day, the community. What are we building? And so I would encourage you, when we have these broad conversations about, great societies and maybe regenerative agriculture, this might be an anchor point for some of you to go back to. Say, okay, where are we in this food system? Where am I in this food system? And most importantly to me, I think you should all note that you're at the top. Consumers are at the top of this food system, and in so many ways, both through our direct purchases, but also through our policy, also through our land use decisions, also through all of these decisions that we collectively make, we have an opportunity, a power, a privilege, and perhaps an obligation to help create the food system that you're about to hear a little bit more about. So with no further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our panelists. First off, John Paul Maxfield is the founder of Waste Farmers. I love this. He started in 2009 with $9,000. So he's a great bootstrapping entrepreneur and has created a number of innovations that fit squarely into this idea of a regenerative system of agriculture. He also comes authentically into this from a family of farmers and has always taken that background and experience through the work he does, whether it's being a private equity associate or helping advise the mayor's office in terms of its own sustainable agricultural policies. In 2007, John Paul was selected as 50 for the Future in Colorado. He's a Denver Business Journal 40 Under 40 and 5280's Top of the Town environmentalist. So we're lucky to have John with us. Thank you for being here. We're also very fortunate to have Dr. Jeffrey Hsu here, the President and CEO of the Plains Conservation Center. Some of you may be aware of that. Before joining the Plains Conservation Center, Dr. Hsu had a diverse career in conservation, education, and sustainability, in which he's been a professor, researcher, environmental educator, as well as a nonprofit CEO, both domestically and in Australia, Europe, Asia, Africa. You're going to notice, see, like I said, I'm the least qualified of all of these guys. Look at these people. And he's currently the CEO of the Plains Conservation Center, a nonprofit dedicated to conservation and restoration of grassland ecosystems and communities. And for those of you who are familiar with Colorado, the grassland ecosystem is a major driver of one of our core ecosystems. He's also a member of the Savory Hub Network and thus dedicated to influencing the health and sustainability of at least a fifth of the world's grasslands, 20% by the year 2025. We'll hear a little bit more about how he intends to do that and is already doing that. Thank you for being here, Jeff. Our next panelist is Seleyn DeYarus, the CEO of Best Organics. Some of you may be familiar with them as a certified B Corporation. They're also a leading provider of organic and sustainable gift baskets. The holidays are around the corner, I'm sure she wouldn't mind me saying. And they also do a variety of brand promotion through that company, as well as Compass Natural, a boutique marketing agency specializing in lifestyles of health and sustainability businesses, which you may or may not be aware of is a $300 billion market. So again, if you need her, I'm sure she'd be happy to help. She's also the co-founder and executive director of At the Epicenter, which is another interactive speaker series, and the board of directors of the Allergy Kid Foundations. And this is my favorite. She's on the advisory board of the Prairie Dog Coalition of the Humane Society of the United States. Very lucky to have Seleyn with us as well. And last but far from least is Hunter Lovins, the founder and president of Natural Capital Solutions. You all may be aware of her most popular book called Natural Capitalism, but of the 15 books she's written, I have a favorite title called The Way Out, Kickstarting Capitalism to Save Our Economic Ass. You also may know that Hunter Lovins has been well-traveled. She's traveled and provided information and briefings to over 30 countries. She's worked in economic development from Afghanistan to New Zealand, and my personal favorite story, served the King of Bhutan on his international expert working group charged with transforming the global economy. Bhutan has roughly the same size population as we do, and they just decided to go all organic. So she might have more information on that I don't know about as well. I also think she's one of, reading her bio is fascinating because she is one of the few people who can literally claim to have created fields of study, particularly economic renewal, green development, and sustainable management. In 2013, due to these contributions and others, she was inducted to the Hall of Fame of the International Society of Sustainability Professionals and has been recognized by Time magazine as a Millennium Hero for the Planet. She also received the 2012 Rachel Carson Award, some of you may be familiar with her, and the European Sustainability Pioneer Award, as well as the Right Livelihood Award, basically the alternative Nobel, assumedly funded by not war. We're very lucky to have Hunter here. Please clap.
What I'm trying to do is sort of balance and tie in conscious capitalism with agriculture, and I think they're very much aligned. And I think the best way to do that is to walk you through, or to start with our purpose statement, which is we are cosmic journeymen and women seeking solutions inspired by natural systems, human potential, and intuitive imagination, with the purpose of enhancing the biosphere, local communities, and one's authentic self. And so it goes from big, right, to small, self, and back. And so I sort of preface that because agriculture is sort of at the core of civilization. And so as we talk about this rise of conscious capitalism, let's talk about trying to shift agriculture, we have to take sort of a step back, which is what I like to do. And in many ways, agriculture sort of marked the beginning of man's separation from the natural world, this beginning of a move from a world of abundance to a world of scarcity. And it really is sort of, Daniel Webster talks about this idea that when tillage happens, civilization begins, right? And so it's very relevant that we're talking about conscious capitalism in the context of agriculture. And agriculture has grown, and really over the last 100 years, 60 years or so, it's industrialized, right? And it's consolidated, and it's focused on yield, and it's focused on chemicals. And a lot of those have been at the expense of the environment, of communities, of health, all the things that we sort of know. And in tandem with that is sort of this robbing of purpose, this robbing of purpose that people naturally sort of feel when connected to good work, when connected to natural systems. And so this beginning of civilization, agriculture as it stands, sort of set the stage for an economic system that sort of mirrored those things, like big corporations, sort of feeding through wealth, through food, and kind of set the stage for an economic system that we presently have, that, as you sort of talk about, sort of has brought us to an edge, right? And so, as we sit today, we sort of see the solution in the problems, like sort of connected, right? And so that's why we sort of exist as a company. And when we look at how we sort of craft solutions, For us, it's sort of driven by our values. And so the regeneration of soil is a big aspect of part of building this new agricultural system. But equal or in tandem with that is reconnecting people back to the natural system. So starting with self. And so we started Maxfield, which is really about, the foundation of which is soil, but it's about reintroducing people to the natural world through growing food on their own, whether in a garden, a small tomato plot, or a small tomato plant. And from there, I think this movement can kind of shift from individual to community, and then to the larger populace. So that's sort of like, where we started. The mentality shifts from a yield-driven discussion to one of efficiency, and not an efficiency in sort of a pure economic term. It's sort of efficiency in terms of nutrient density, space, efficiency, things like that. And I started growing amaranth, and some of you might be familiar with it through the bio-intensive, biodynamic, more bio-intensive method. And so I started growing it and really fell in love with it. And then was riding my bike around the neighborhood up here, not too far up in the Highlands, and it was growing wild next to a stop sign. And I was like, no, if that's not a sign, I don't know what is. And so it's all to say that you follow this plant down its natural path. It grabs you in, and the first question, so like, trust your gut, listen, and always ask questions. Like, why don't we have more of this growing? Like, why? It has 3 times the potassium of a banana. It has 3 times the calcium of milk. It's a complete protein, but why is there less than 2,000 acres in this country? Why, with between 30 and 80,000 edible plants, why does modern agriculture only focus on 200, and why does 75% of our diet come from 12 plants? And so that prompted us to start Beyond 12 Foods, which is our brand focused on developing markets for these underutilized plants. So we're done? Okay, sorry. So that's it. Yeah, so here's what I'll wrap up and say. Like, what I'm trying to tie in is conscious capitalism, because the agricultural part of it is an aspect, trying to tie in the conscious capitalism thing. Like, I think previous generations have sort of tied into this disconnect with the economy, and you sort of rebelled with music, and we're a generation yum, so we're rebelling through food. Like, our taste buds are sort of that place where we're rebelling. And so food is this place we can kind of, we can find that connection place. And then further, like with B Corp, building businesses that have purpose can sort of help to create institutions and ecosystems where we can all get together and sort of solve these problems and find that meaning we lost when agriculture started this train many years ago.
I read the other day this great quote: of the many problems our world faces, food is one we actually might be able to do something about. So from that perspective, but also from the conversation of sustainable agriculture as part of this broad food system, and this system being present whether we're looking at these big macroeconomic issues or we're looking at soil biology and really trying to figure out what this multi-stakeholder universe looks like. So from your work, can you tell us a little bit about the stakeholders of sustainable agriculture and how we might think about that in our life and our business?
Thank you, and I'm also extremely honored to be here. And a few caveats up front. I feel like a biggest poser trying to talk about agriculture. I killed a cactus last year in my apartment. It's very hard to do, but I managed to do it. I'm talented. So very humbled to be on this panel. 20 years ago, farmers, ranchers, environmentalists, and people interested in human health would not be in a room together. And that's, to me, an amazing thing that this space brings together. And I think the other thing that really comes together with that is something inherent in food itself, which is inspiration and hope. I often think chefs are they're one of the few artists that get to like look upon their work and say, that's amazing, right? Like they get to taste what they've made and be like, oh, that's incredible, that's the most amazing thing, and that I created it. Like every other artist will just look at the critique and critique their own work and said, oh, the colors could have been better and the shape could have been better. And so I think we're at a really unique place in this movement of sustainability, of agriculture, of moving the needle forward, because we realize that hope and inspiration is an incredibly important ingredient in this movement that we're trying to create. I'm a recovering academic, I like to say, so I've become really bad at remembering exactly where I've heard things, and because I was forced to cite them specifically as an academic, but someone very knowledgeable, was either Richard Louv or Wendell Berry, said, how many of you would be happy with a sustainable marriage or sustainable partnership? Do you know who it was?
Bill McDonough's the popularizer of it.
I heard Richard Louv quoting someone, and I can't remember who he quoted. Bill McDonough. Okay, let's give credit where credit's due. And I think it's a great point. It's like this idea of sustainability, it's stasis, it's flat, and what we're really looking for is growth and inspiration and something that goes beyond. And so I think the sustainable agriculture, whether we move to regenerative agriculture, but I think there's a movement afoot that is about growth and hope and inspiration. And then coupling that with what we see in the business world, it's also an incredible time. I heard again, I can't remember where I read it or who said it, sorry, but
on the internet?
Yeah, I'll just quote. It's easy now, right? I quote the internet. That business is the great organizer of human effort. And I thought that was really poignant, right? Without, taking out the purpose of profit, but just saying, yeah, business is incredibly, probably one of the best machines we have for efficient organization of effort towards a goal. And what we're seeing now is the goal is about regeneration, the goal is about healthier human systems and healthier agriculture systems and healthier natural systems. Speaking a bit about our organization and the Savory Institute specifically, then we have a very unique way of working out stakeholder engagement. We arm wrestle, and this injury here is a direct. So I clearly lost on the last. No. We're very, very lucky to be part of a very unique movement, which is the Plains Conservation Center. We are a nonprofit organization. We've existed since 1949. We started as a conservation district, which was set up after the Dust Bowl to try to prevent the Dust Bowl from happening again. So we have a long history in agriculture. And very recently, we got to be part of what is the Savory Network, which is what will eventually be 100 individual self-sustaining organizations around the globe that's promoting holistic management, which is a framework, a decision-making framework, a land management framework developed by Alan Savory. And and specifically applied to grasslands, it's about bringing to consciousness the management of what is 1/3 of the world's land surface. And 70%, it's estimated 70% of that land surface is degraded in some way, and depending on who you look at, either less than 1% or 0% are formally protected in some way. So management of grasslands is inherently tied to better agriculture and inherently tied to triple bottom line results for those producers and for those ranchers. So we're very lucky to be part of this network, and it's a very great example actually of the sort of stakeholder question, which one of the things I read from I love from the Conscious Capitalism book was this idea that you can either look for synergies or you can look for conflicts when you think of stakeholders. And the choice is up to you. And where you put your focus is where the solution will come. And this is definitely true for the Savory Network. We have a very diverse, we have hubs in North America, in Africa, in Europe, in South America. We have very large organizations, we have individual producers, and very diverse stakeholders, and all coming together for a single purpose.
Can we reflect a little bit on the intentional creation of culture? And whether that's at the soil level, or at the individual level, at the community level, or at the organizational level, how do we think about sustainable agriculture within that cultural framework?
Great, thank you. Well, I want to also echo my fellow panelists' acknowledgement of what a joy and honor it is to be here on this panel with these esteemed others, and particularly my friend Hunter, who I have had her on several panels that I've moderated, so to be sitting next to you is an honor. And thank you for all of you choosing to spend your evening with us tonight. That's very cool, so I appreciate you. My company, it's called Best Organics, and our brand is called America's Best Organics, and we are the nation's only all-organic gift basket in a box company in the United States. We have been in business since 2009, and actually the company started in 2006 with a focus exclusively on Boulder and all of the food businesses that are located there, and it was called Boulder's Best Organics. And after a stint at the Organic Center, where I was the development director, I had met incredible business owners all around the nation, and I decided, well, I wanted to jump to America and work with all these incredible people creating incredible products. That was a lot of incredibles in one sentence. So, I have a more diverse vocabulary, which I will try to exercise. I wanted to speak to a couple of just interesting factoids about kind of how our culture in the United States is shifting as we look at what millennials are introducing to the marketplace. And one of the facts that I find particularly interesting is that social responsibility really marks a high point of interest for that demographic. So 91% of millennials really will be driven by a purchase decision on the social responsible character of the company that the product is made by. So my business has really focused on the premise that doing it right, doing it well, and serving this higher notion, which for a gift company, our mission is about growing the demand for organic products, which thereby would increase the amount of food production and acreage in organic production in the United States. It is a very small amount of land that is actually devoted to organic agriculture in the United States. It's less than 1% of all agricultural land. So, this is a very audacious desire to see this number increase. We import a lot of the companies that we do business with, who are all sharing with us this drive to be social mission enterprises, are having to source a lot of the products that go into their products from outside the United States. So there's a huge opportunity for agriculture in this country to transition to organic production. And there are a host of drivers behind that I'm going to touch on in my moment here. One of the other things I wanted to mention from a cultural perspective, which is what I'm charged with speaking to you about. Within my company, driving culture and baking into our DNA are the principles we've derived from becoming a certified B Corporation. May I see a show of hands of those of you who know what B Corporations are about? Sweet. You guys have done a good job, Cara.
We have someone from B Corp here this evening as well.
Yes, we do. So we actually have, what's cool is Colorado is the first state in the United States to have a dedicated team, because we actually have the highest number of B Corps in the United States concentrate in Colorado. We have like 60 B corporations. There are 1,462 in the world, and they're in 42 countries. So it's a really exciting and dynamic and growing movement, but we obviously want to see those numbers be much, much larger. Part of the B Corp intention is that you're looking at, as you all seem to know already, it's like the 360 view of your business. How are you operating in relationship to your employees? How are you setting up your governance? How are you engaging with your community? And then kind of what's your whole chain of custody and how you're doing business and who you're doing business with, and how deep do you track that whole footprint of what you do and how you do what you do. So that has been a highly informative process for our business as we've learned more about ourselves by going through the impact assessment, but also in doing business with fellow B Corps, which is a part of how we feel like we extend the virtuous reach of what our small gift company can do, is by partnering with other businesses who share our drive to have a higher impact in the community. That steps us into culture beyond the internal space, into the community at large, or the business climate. In Colorado, we enjoy a really robust and progressive business climate, and I'm excited to see the number of entrepreneurs that flock to this community, both in Denver, and I'm very familiar with the Boulder scene because I'm based out of Longmont. All of these young entrepreneurs are attracted to the density of food manufacturers here. So innovation is driving all of these creatives to come into our community and to be manufacturing things like boba bars and Choco Love and Bhakti Chai and Olamomo, and I could go, the list is long. It's amazing. Those are just like 4. So the other layer in all of this, excuse me, I'm going to refer to my notes, is kind of taking that concept of local. And I don't know how I think this gets to be where we may not all agree, but local to me is we're all local, which means the entire planet is local, because wherever you are, you're there, and so whatever you're generating in your locale is relevant to that space. But to say that I can't go and do business with you because you're somewhere else, I don't particularly agree with that being a premise against local. Does that follow at all? Yes? So I see some nods out there. Cool. Because this introduced the notion of fair trade. Fair trade is so necessary to, let's say, exporting and importing the notion of sustainable regenerative agriculture all over the planet. And if we're creating markets all over the planet that help create a robust local reality, then that can only serve to engender more intelligent practices in each locale, because we've developed a market that's demanding products that meet that standard. I think that's a really exciting, potentialized aspect of all of the dialogue that's going on in the market right now around why higher ethical practice matters. When we talk about sustainability from the standpoint, to me, it's like we're trying to fix what we've gone awry with. Sustainability is kind of bringing us up to the level, as Hunter likes to say, where our nose is just right here above the water, because we're trying to correct for practices that have been so, disregarding of the impact that's happening, and we just kind of, well, if I don't have to keep it on my books, then who cares that I've just devastated an entire ecosystem over here? We just made mountains of profit. That is a very, dislocated, thank you very much. That's a very dislocated kind of thinking.
Degenerative.
It is a degenerative, exactly. So there's this next layer in all of this, which takes us into regeneration, which is, how many of you have heard the term regenerative agriculture? Sweet. Well, choir, let's just do a big ah. That's wonderful. Well, since you already know, I'll just say a few things from the standpoint of where my business life is. I also have a company called Compass Natural, which is involved in an organization called Regenerative International. And this is a nonprofit that is going to be really driving a conversation around this notion that we have the solution to a huge aspect of our carbon problem right beneath our feet. And how we manage soil, forests, I mean literally from golf courses to agricultural lands to our plains to our forests. If we are looking at the fact that nature, you know, well before we popped into the picture, kind of had it all sorted. And we have introduced an enormous amount of disruption to the equation. What's exciting is that we have the opportunity to take some lessons from nature and honor all of the intelligence that's already there and get our proverbial butts in gear and drive better choices. Regenerative agriculture is something that Hunter will speak more directly about. What I'm going to kind of conclude with is you and I are each, every single day, making decisions on how we're going. This is all locally made, my clothing, by the way. All choices that we're making are driving the bigger picture that we either are matching up to what we state are our ideals or we're out of alignment with those. And obviously none of us can get that right perfectly all the time. But what I will just encourage you to remember is that this is your biggest play on a daily basis, is how you spend your money and what you're spending it on. So just never, never underestimate the significance of those decisions. And I'm going to just say, you know, americasbestorganics.com. That's, you know, I'm done.
There's no way to cover it by. Say whatever you want.
Bill Reed, who runs a company called Regenesis, likes this latter analogy, that we're moving from degenerative systems up to the line of sustainability. And whatever complaints we may have about that word, we got to get there. Otherwise, we are unsustainable. And as Dennis Meadows says, the definition of if something's not sustainable, it's going to stop. And if we keep doing what we're doing, it's going to stop. Through restoration, and we have to repair a great deal of the harm we've done. But then moving on to systems that are regenerative. What does it mean to be regenerative? Taking Bob Costanza's notion of the economy exists within society, which exists within a biosphere, and we have to be in right relationship with all of this. Holistic wealth. Wealth doesn't mean money. Money's useful, but it's not all of wealth. Wealth is community. Wealth is knowing your neighbors. It's being able to grow food. Innovative and adaptive. Entrepreneurial. Humans are inherently entrepreneurial. We begin again. Empowered participation, that you have a say in the economy that affects you. Edge effect abundance. You spoke about diversity. In nature, the most abundant ecosystems are where two of them come together. A river meets the ocean, a forest meets a meadow, because they're diverse. Robust circulation, the circular economy, Walter Stahel's work. Our bodies exist because of our circulatory system. Shut it down at any point, you die. Seeking balance between efficient economies and resilient economies. Go too far to resilience and you're stagnant. Go too far to efficiency and you have what we have now, which is the tower economy. We're flowing money to the top as fast as we can, very effectively. Not the kind of economy we all want to live in. And then most importantly, it honors place. Now, you don't have to be autarkically local. I'm a big fan of Scotch whiskey. Yeah, Colorado makes whiskey, not like Talisker. But you also want to have what you have to have within your own local economy. So do for yourself, local self-reliance, as much as you can, and then trade vigorously to everybody's advantage. Wendell Berry said, what I stand for is what I stand on.
Yeah, right.
We think we exist because of this big brain of ours. No, we don't. We exist because of 6 inches of soil and the fact that it rains. And modern agriculture is destroying that. We keep hearing, oh, we have to feed the world, therefore we need GMOs. Oh, we have to feed the world, therefore we need industrial agriculture. UNCTAD came out in 2013 and said, in fact, that's not true. The only way we are going to be able to feed the world is with smallholder organic agriculture. Pretty cool, huh?
Yeah.
Here's where we save the world. To keep global warming below the 2 degrees C, and 2 degrees C is a political number, it's not a scientific number, it's really much more like 1.5. We're going to have to take carbon out of the air, not just stop the continued emissions. And everything all of us have been doing around energy efficiency, renewable energy, everything in this building, those are all rungs on the ladder up out of the muck. But ultimately what we have to do is regenerate the soil such that it pulls carbon out of the air and puts it back in the soil where it belongs. It's the only way we're going to sequester carbon. A mere 2% increase in soil carbon and we soak up all of the anthropogenic, human-caused carbon emissions of all history. The world's grasslands are the second largest carbon sink. The oceans are the biggest and they're saturated, which is why we're now seeing the kind of global warming impacts that we're getting. The grasslands can soak up the carbon we've been emitting, the carbon we had emitted. Now, we don't want to keep emitting it, but the grasslands can solve this problem and do it profitably. The top 2 and the bottom, same day, looking north, looking south, conventionally grazed, holistically grazed. And the one in the middle is 1 year to the next year. This is what's possible using grazing animals, but using Janine Benyus's concept of biomimicry. Nature creates conditions conducive to life. And if you raise cattle, grow crops the way nature did. In the case of grazing animals, dense pack, predators were going round and round them. The only safe place to be is in the middle of the herd, so you're always trying to get into the middle, and you're chopping the soil up, and you're fertilizing it, and you eat everything, and then move on. You don't come back until the grass has regrown. What that does is support the biological community below ground, which is much richer than that above ground, and without which you have no health in the soil, and thus no health in humanity. Again, same day, looking north, looking south. Holistic management, conventional management. This photo was taken by John Fullerton, who has a group called Grasslands LLC. This is a company managing big tracts of land to use holistic management to increase the profitability and to sequester carbon. Guess what? It's what the customer wants too. When we started feeding corn to cows, we started making the cows unhealthy and making ourselves unhealthy. So what's the most sustainable food? Locally raised, holistically managed grass beef. Wouldn't have thought it, huh? When I think of Alan, I think of this. It's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done better. The credit belongs to the man or the woman who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs and comes up short again and again, because there is no effort without error or shortcoming, but who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself for a worthy cause, who at best in the end knows triumph of high achievement, and who at worst, if he fails, at least he fails while daring greatly. so that her place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat.
Right on.
This was a Republican.
The last true Republican.
We need to heal our politics just as much as we need to heal our soil. And we need to begin getting back to people who know the land, who know community, and who know courage. Maimonides said each of us must see ourselves as though the entire world were held in balance, and any deed we might do could tip the scales. So here's what I challenge you. Find what it is that you care about and live a life that shows it. As Bucky said, we're called to be the architects of the future, not its victims.
I told you it was a good panel. So we have a chance now, we have about 10 minutes to take some audience questions. I'll ask you to keep them relatively brief, though they should be profound in nature. And we'll work, yeah, exactly, no pressure. We'll work the mic.
So, as we are the choir, and as you all work around with your colleagues who are also in sustainability, how do you reach out to that rest of the community? And I've seen them, you know, the folks who are doing completely not what we're doing. How do you reach out to them with your businesses and with your life choices and your communication?
Not to try to convince someone of what matters to us, but to find what matters to them and then make a connection.
I'm just going to throw a couple things out. I think it's a really great question. How do we get from talking to each other and having conversations outside of that space? So the organization that we're actually housed under Hunter's organization, Natural Capitalism Solutions, at the Epicenter, we create events and we produce conversational events where we bring people in to come and engage, similar to this, but we're also tapping a diverse audience, and we also live stream. And then I think through like my company, what we do is we do a lot of blogging, and we also help produce an event in Boulder called the Boulder Green Streets, which has a big, we're talking about 25,000 people come. And we produce something called the Organic Alley Pavilion, where people get to interact with businesses in the food space and sample their products and engage and learn and kind of get that engagement opportunity with a business that they might not have a sense of who and what, which I think, this is small scale because this is all in the local space, but I think the internet becomes an incredible tool as a way to get your story out there and find your SEO keyword search that will help bring people to you, so that if they're curious, they might land and learn something new. It's an interesting conundrum, but I think all of us have different ways we're playing with that in unique ways. Do you want to add?
Throw a better party. My boss Dave Brower used to say, if the Titanic's going down and you come alongside, you go, your boat sucks, this is not useful. If you say, hey, come with us, we have the party boat, you might get some folk to switch over. We all take ourselves way too seriously.
As someone who grows food in Colorado, something that I'm always thinking about is water issues. So I'll try to put this succinctly. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being not at all and 10 being all the time, how much do you consider water scarcity in the work that you do? And how do you approach that and address that in a way that's not just sustainable but regenerative? Is that a 9?
That's a 9.
Yeah, 9. Definitely.
How many times?
What are you saying? 9 what?
How seriously do you take water?
Yeah. Well, we're in the West. 10.
I feel this pressure to be like that one judge on The Voice that's like 2. No, absolutely, it's at the top of our priorities. And what's exciting again about the work we do in grasslands is that we're talking about not just how much water do we receive, but what do we do with the water after it hits the ground? How do we keep it on the ground? How do we keep it in the soil? How do we, what's the effective water usage on that piece of land, not just how much hits that piece of land?
So I put it as a 10. I mean, there's a reason the government gave folks acreage to move out here way back when. Like, it's a pretty desolate place, and particularly in Colorado. Best place to manage water in the soil. So rebuilding that soil is an important thing. And then again, getting back to sort of looking at why are we growing corn here? That amaranth was growing next to a stop sign. It uses 40% less water. It can grow in some pretty, for lack of a better word, crappy soils. And as CO2 rises, it's a C4 metabolizer. So are there plants that are more relevant for certain areas that work with water? But water's a huge issue, and that gets into the discussion about local and some of these broader points too.
How do you get the government to get on board all of this? Cultural change, really, all players are important, and relevancy really comes from culture change. So how are you engaging the policy people?
Is find an organization that's tracking and stay on top of it. Corn is an excellent, what? It's crazy, right? I mean, why are we growing corn in Colorado? It's loopy. And corn isn't really for you or for me. It's for plastics. It's for feeding all these animals who get horrible gut disorders because they're being fed something they're not supposed to eat. And it's all genetically modified. And that raises a whole other host of issues. I just read a piece recently from Food Democracy Now!, which is a group you could tune into. They talk a lot about what's going on agriculturally. And this DARK Act, which the discussion that was just held in the Senate was like we love GMO ceremony. I mean, it was like both sides of the aisle were like, GMO is so good. That's because Monsanto is like, let me write you a big fat check. So this is really important. I would say right now, this is probably one of the most important things going on in Washington as it relates to the topic that we're having a conversation on today. The DARK Act would basically make it no longer possible for states to exercise any will over what was grown and to call out, we don't want to have GMOs grown here. So the DARK Act, call our, Bennett and Cory Gardner and let them know that you want nothing to do with the DARK Act. You want to know. I remember.
He took 10 grand from Monsanto,
Cory Gardner. Yeah, well, these guys are buying up votes, so that's my long answer to your short and succinct question. But staying tuned in is so critical if you're people who care. I can't emphasize it enough.
We don't work much in the advocacy space, but I have friends that have worked very closely for years in advocating for gay marriage, and friends who are now taking that model and applying it to anti-corruption. And so here's where I would say go local, because and remember successes. And think of 10 years ago, we never thought gay marriage would ever be federally legal, and that success was based on tons and tons and tons of local ordinances first that put pressure on state ordinance, that eventually put pressure on federal ordinances. So I think it's a different model that's emerging. I think we have. I grew up in the Boulder of Massachusetts, Amherst, Massachusetts, and I was sort of taking over buildings when I was 4 years old because that's what you're supposed to do, and marching on Washington. I don't know why, and I think we're seeing in some ways a more sophisticated advocacy model emerging that is really strategic, and I think we could learn a lot from the successes from other movements.
How many of you are going to Paris? Why? Paris? Cool. End of November into the 11th of December, the Conference of Parties of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change will be meeting in Paris. This is an annual event, but this one, we might actually make a difference. And so I'll be in Paris, Seleyn will be in Paris, Steve Hoffman will be in Paris, and he just handed me a very cool document. The French government has challenged... Yeah, we'll be in Paris.
I couldn't resist.
Has challenged the world to a 4% increase in soil carbon per year. And this document lays out what it is they're proposing to do. Who can join? States, local authorities, companies, farmers' organizations, NGO, research institutes, basically everybody. Register at 4p1000.dgpe at agriculture.gouv, French have to spell it differently, .fr. This is an initiative of the French government.
How cool is that?
The French are very serious about enabling this climate summit to work. A lot of us have been very skeptical. Now, Paris is going to fail. Maybe not. Maybe not. And here's something that those of you who care about agriculture can get involved with on behalf of the climate.
What I'd like to ask you all to do is just produce some gratitude for our panel here.